This is a gentleman who is very well known in the market, and those of you who are too young to remember him, your parents, I promise, will know him. He is Frits the Night Owl. He spent many years in radio and television in the Columbus market. And I said I apologize if we're late because we've been sitting over there reminiscing radio and television in Columbus for the last half hour. And I told him we got to stand up and go because I could sit there and talk another hour with him without any problem at all. Frits is going to tell you a little bit about what all he's done. He's got some really great stories. Let's give him a nice round of applause.
First of all, let me ask, how many of you have ever seen any of my shows or know what it is that, oh, I help warp children's minds over the years? Okay. Now, I'm going to leave most of the time of my spiel here for questions, so we'll be sure to touch on things that are interesting to you. But I started in radio back when it was powered by steam. It was 1959, and I was at WMNI. I had majored in radio, TV, theater at Ohio State, and was also an English major. And my degrees in secondary education, fortunately, the high schools in the central Ohio area have been spared my presence, other than for a couple of months I taught at Bliss College. Is that still around? Business school. Anyway, I taught at Bliss College during the Vietnam War, and every male student in there was an absolute saint. Any ideas why? They didn't want to lose that draft deferment.
Oh, okay.
I could have said, each of you bring $10 to class and lay it on my desk before we start class, and there would have been a pile of money. But to see how radio has changed so much over when I started in '59, and I must say, I got started by lying. I had been, as I say, a radio, TV, theater major at Ohio State, and then I got drafted. I went to the Army, 57 through '59, and the hard Army duty, the Army had me stationed in New York City at the old Paramount Studios, which are now Kaufman Astoria. If you saw The Wiz, Fort Apache, The Bronx, almost any major picture that uses big studio space in New York City, they'll either use Kaufman Astoria, formerly Signal Corps Pictorial Center, or they'll use one called, I forget the name of it, but it used to be a bakery, a huge bakery thing, and they changed the bakery into a studio. But there is where I learned about narrating movies and special effects and television. A lot of this stuff was new. They were just experimenting with videotape at that time. And I should say, going back to Ohio State, for example, it was a very good performance school. We had, like, to get the radio TV qualification, we had 15 hours of just radio, TV announcing, as to where we were 5 days a week for an hour a day, class of about 20, we would go in and they would just have us, we'd take turns, we'd be reading newscasts, and we'd be reading commercials, and we'd be standing in front of the TV camera or the mic, and the radio dramas were still big, so we would produce the radio dramas like Sam Spade and Superman and all of that, where they had a director and a guy who with the sound, you know, if you needed a gunshot, this guy gave you the gunshot or the sound of feet walking down the hall. The director would cue the feet and the sound of the feet were there, and this was all done live, and there was no audio tape at this time. It was just on the edge of being invented, and they would record direct to disc, and then they would send these discs out to the stations that would play these shows, or they'd play them on the network, or they did have wire recording, which was lousy quality and very temperamental in terms of breakage. But it was quite, Ohio State at that time was quite heavily into performing. And of course the radio, TV, and the theater all together, you found out that, say, if you were on TV, the motions, et cetera, that you would have to make on the theater, you had to bring them way, way back in, because the camera would do a lot of the acting for you. So you do a subtle gesture for TV, but be real big if some guy on the third balcony, had to see you. And again, the way you would project was different, slightly different from radio, TV, theater. But they really taught you well. They taught you hard sell, soft sell, medium sell, and then you would do these dramas. So that was terrific. The job of the radio actor actually existed where you could go to New York, Chicago, Los Angeles, and just like people audition now for the soap operas, you would audition for the radio soap operas, the radio Sam Spade, Michael Shane, all of those shows. And the radio actor was a legit job. And it was nice because if you had, I have essentially, how can I put it? Who is a big action adventure popular star today? Well, anyway, it's on radio. I had the leading man voice. So you would hear my voice and you would envision Victor Mature, Rory Calhoun, Hugh O'Brien, any of the action stars of the day, and yet it was coming out of this Woody Allen body. So there was this dichotomy between the way I looked and the way I sounded. But on the old radio shows, it didn't make any difference. Any of you remember the show Jake and the Fat Man?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
William Conrad, who's got a voice that makes all of us sound like sopranos. William Conrad, the Fat Man on Jake and the Fat Man, for years was the voice of Matt Dillon on Gunsmoke, on the radio show. And they talk about the evils of the West, and one man can stop the evils, and they'd say, "Who's that man?" "I'm that man, Matt Dillon, Matt Marshall, Dodge." Boom, you go through. So there was all kinds of opportunities. I mentioned I got the job by lying. They had a catch-22 when I was applying for a full-time radio DJ job in '59 after I got out of the Army. And the thing was, with most commercial stations, they would say, "Well, where have you worked commercially before?" And you'd say, "Well, I haven't worked commercially before. I'm just going around making the rounds now." And they would say, "Well, sorry, we have a policy that we can't or won't hire you unless you've had commercial experience before." And then you would say, "Well, how do I get commercial experience if no commercial radio station will hire me without it?" And that's where all of a sudden you learn about catch-22. So the way I got on the air was WMNI needed a breathing body with an intelligence quotient of maybe 20 to babysit their nighttime Saturday night programming and Sunday morning church program. So I went in and applied for the job, which was essentially a babysitting job. And they said, "Can you run a board?" And I said, "Oh, well, sure, I know how to run a board. It just depends on what kind of a board it is." Because, we have certain kinds. I'd never seen a board. So anyway, the guy gives me the job at 75 cents an hour. We're talking 1959. And so I go in to watch the guy who's doing the night shift. And I mean to say, in these days, there was no audio cassettes. So if you had to play like an Ohio School of Broadcasting commercial number 6, you had a reel-to-reel tape. You put it on the machine and throw the machine in queue, and then one, two, and you queue it up by the spaces to where it's number 6. And then you'd have like maybe what they called electrical transcriptions, which were commercials, but they were on these big discs. And they would say, "Okay, we want Sohio number 34. Well, have any of you ever queued up a vinyl disc? Do you know what it is? Well, in the days before tapes and all that stuff, and you actually played the record, you put the needle down on the thing, microphone there, you put it in cue, and you turn it back a quarter of a turn. Then you'd hold your finger on it, fire off the turntable, and you'd be holding the record down, and this velvet turntable would be turning underneath the record. You're holding it down, and you're saying the time, the temperature. Okay, here's the new one by Frank Sinatra singing "My Way," written by Paul Anka. Lift your finger, and bam! There's no wow in or anything like that. It just starts. Here's Frank Sinatra, bam! Or if you wanted to talk over the intro, you'd let the record fly, and you just start talking, and you'd be listening to the music in your headset. And when you knew there was 21 seconds before the guy started to sing, so you were done with your intro, 19 seconds into introducing the song. So a lot of the stuff, it's changed so much, as I say, like in television, there were no teleprompters. And it used to be that you would take, and I still do this for the movie we do on at Studio 35. As a matter of fact, a week from this Saturday night, we're doing the Night Owl version of Raiders of the Lost Ark. And so I still make idiot cards like that. I'll take a piece of paper 8 by 10, and I'll write my script or my ideas, the thing I want to talk to, real large. And then when I'm like 8 yards back from the camera, I just read the stuff and ad lib around the notes that I've made. And as I said, there was no teleprompters like today. It's all done electronically. I was in radio from 59 until 74, when they got really heavily into formats, which I hated. At BNS at the time, it used to be when I started there, it was play what you want, say what you want. We don't care what you play, we don't care what you say, just get all the commercials that are logged in the hour and hit the news at the top of the hour. That was, so if you wanted to play Miles Davis next to Justin Bieber, next to New Kids on the Block, next to Thelonious Monk, and you could pull it off with your verbalization, that was just fine. They didn't care. But then they got into where they format. And like at BNS Radio in my last 3 years, we had a 20-song playlist. We were located on the 3rd floor of the at 62 East Broad, and they had the music piped on the elevator. So when I'd get on the elevator to do my 10 in the morning till 2 in the afternoon show, when I'd get on that elevator and I would hear what song was playing, I knew what song my show was going to start with and end with. And you play the same, and you would play the same 20 songs twice a day, because you had like a 4-hour show. So if you just imagine 6 days a week playing the same 20 songs, it turns your brain to jello. So when the chance came to be a television announcer, I jumped at that and left radio behind. And then as the television announcer, they had a job which no longer exists called booth announcer. Booth announcer was a great job for a lazy person like me, because what you would do is for 22 minutes, well actually 28 minutes, you would sit there and watch the network programming. Then that minute and a half, the networks would sell to the local station. So maybe there would be a half-minute preview for a movie that was coming to town. And there'd be 25 seconds on the screen showing you the movie, and then a slide would come up and say Lowe's, Ohio, RKO Palace, and then the announcer would go there and you'd open your page to the movie things. It starts tomorrow at these theaters. And then you turn the page and maybe you had to do like a public service announcement for the blood bank. Then you turn the page again and you have to read, okay, here are the specials for Kroger. And with one eye you're reading the copy and the other eye you're making sure when you're talking about the tomato soup that the tomato soup is on screen. So that's the way it was to be a booth announcer, and part of that was being the host for the movie. And that is to say, we'll be back with Mike McGrainer and Ride Out for Revenge after these words. Well, it always bothered me that it seemed that the guys that were doing the movies were never watching the movies that were on. And so, I just, one night on there, I said, well, you know, it's midnight, who's listening? Here's some music to play. I gave him a nice, easy, loping jazz thing. And it's a movie called Treasure of Pancho Villa. And Rory Calhoun robs a bank. He's riding out of town in a cloud of dust, goes around, and here on the side of the building is a huge Coca-Cola ad. And then the movie goes to black for the commercials, and the little owl slide comes up, and I said, gee, you know, after robbing a bank, Rory should stop for the real thing. Why doesn't he have a Coke? And so I started to rap like that, and the music was playing, and my boss didn't say anything. And so I just started to talk about the movies, and letters came into Frits the Night Owl. They knew my voice from radio, and the show was called Night Owl Theater. And so they decided, well, you know, we're getting letters from Frits the Night Owl, let's create one. Well, so they had a number of ideas. Fortunately, they passed on most of them. One of them was like putting me in an owl suit like the San Diego Chicken. And
Whoa.
having been the multiple sclerosis dog for a number of times, I can only tell you that those suits, like the San Diego Chicken or the MS dog or whatever it is, those suits are hot. They're terrible in the summer. I mean, it's 90 degrees outside, it's 120, you've got your own sauna going on in the suit. On the other hand, if you're doing the Christmas parade, everybody else is freezing their buns off and you're nice and warm in the owl. Anyway, they dumped the owl suit idea. And Elton John was big then, and big glasses were big. So they went to CVS, and right off the rack, for about $10, they got these Christian Dior big sunglasses. And then our art department cut masonite horns and glued them on. And then he broke a mirror and glued speech is my major. Glued the pieces of mirror onto the horns. And the reason he did that was we had a starburst filter on the camera, and the pieces of mirror at odd angles, when I would turn my head, you would get a flash of light. But it wasn't predictable because the mirrors were at all odd angles. The dopers loved it. They were getting these great visual effects I'd learned in the Army, plus a light show to boot and great jazz. Now, Superman has to go into a phone booth to become Superman. Bruce Wayne has to go into the Batcave to do Batman. The owl simply opens this little, used to carry music cassette tapes. Any of you old enough to remember music cassette tapes? Okay. And you carry them around a little box of it. So I modified one, and the guys actually he went to CVS, bought the. So for me to become the owl was just take off the glasses, get the Count Basie hat lifted up a little bit, and the owl was ready to go. And it's nice to know that while people have forgotten me, they still remember the guy with the glasses. I tell people I'm like a Columbus, I'm a Columbus icon like the Ohio Penitentiary, except that they haven't torn me down yet. So then Mike and the Andy Man from CD 101 and Dino from Dino Morning Show decided to resurrect my bones from retirement, and they broached me on doing a version of Night Owl Theater on the internet. And so we started it. And I didn't want to do it. I figured, who's going to want to see this, except maybe some relatives or some real movie junkies or movie junkies or horror fans. But my family and everybody said, do it, and okay. And they're going to show it, debut it at the Grandview Theater on the big screen at the same time that they put it on the internet. Now when I was in the Army, somebody had convinced the powers that be at the Army that if you kinescoped a training film or a promotional film, that they could get the same quality out of kinescope that you could out of 35mm film. And they actually had produced a film where this was true. It was true that one time. The rest of the time when you would kinescope something and then they would, you'd be out in the field and they'd take a sheet and they'd hang it down the side of a truck and then they'd project this thing. You could see all those scan lines. But it was a quick and inexpensive way to make movies. So when you sit down and show it on the big screen at Studio 35, I think, oh my God, the scan lines on a screen the size of 35 are going to look like prison bars. But we did it, and we went and the theater was full. I said my mea culpas, and we've been doing it now into our third year, 3.5 years. And it's at Studio 35 now. And so it's kind of the career in a nutshell. A lot of it just happened. But the thing that is you do have to be ready if something does happen. You've got to have the chops to be able to read something, hard sell, soft sell, meat, like MNI. I worked at MNI 59 to 61. And in those days, all of the record producers, and they were the second rock station in town. COL owned rock and roll and was #1, but MNI was close because they were the second rock station. But it was a thing you'd say, the song was finished. Hey, Monday 92 time 1247, Big Eye weather, right temperature 52 degrees in downtown Columbus from the WMNI, your tower of power, high atop the Southern Hotel. And then they had a 3-note gong and a mallet, bong, 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 and they had to reach behind me to a reel-to-reel tape, flip that off, and that was a singing jingle, and they only had 2 pots on the board. So you're always taking that center thing, okay, that's on the air, that's on cue, that's on the air, and the records are, and in the meantime, you're queuing up another little 2.5-minute 45, and praying that, or it might be a 33, and you're hoping that you got the speed set right, so when you introduce the fabulous Fabian again, he was at the right speed. So it's changed a lot. So let's, if there are any questions.